Let's keep moving. We have two more things to go. Okay, so for the bank accounts, so let's just think about what you usually put. You put checking, right? And you say TD Bank, something like that. Account number 1234,
Right.
right? And then you have a value $600. Okay, I'm just putting that down. And now today is $200. Okay, so the mistake that some people put in is for accounts that are in two names. Okay,
Right.
so and two names come in three forms. Okay, so if
Right.
you have a joint account with your spouse,
Right.
right, you should say checking joint or joint checking, or I usually say checking JT, or you could say joint. Okay,
Mhm.
and then you still say TD Bank,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, and it's still the same number 1234, right? Four. And now the value on valuation date is actually 300 to you because it's joint
Oh,
checking. And in law, very important, in law, in the Family Law Act, it says that we're going to presume that if an account or property is put into joint names, that it's meant to be equal between
right.
the spouses.
Right.
Okay. Now here's where that's mistake number one, is not doing that math of changing it. Okay.
Okay.
Now, now mistake number two is, what if you have an RESP? Okay. Now an RESP is also a joint account of sorts, or your name can be on it with a child.
Right.
It's not really a joint account. Okay. It's more of an in trust account,
Yes, that's
right?
right.
Um, and that you can claim is not your property at all. So that's zero. Or
Mm-hmm.
I would actually, it's more accurate to say just not included.
Oh,
Okay. Now it's good practice on an RESP or for any such accounts where you're claiming that it's really not my money, it's
yeah.
money that is for that it really belongs to someone else.
Yeah.
And here it's a child,
Yeah.
to actually say that the value at separation, at valuation, let's say,
Yeah.
is $600. Okay, it's good practice to say it, but you're
Oh,
not including it in the calculation because it's not your money.
right. Okay.
Now people do fight over whether that money ought to be included or not. That's a whole other question. But
Mhm.
for starters, an account that's in trust with a child, as an example, is not really your money.
Right.
In the true sense, it's for the benefit of the child. So
Right.
now let's do number three,
Hmm.
which is um, let's call it joint with, I don't know, sister.
Oh, that's a
Okay,
good
that's
one. Okay. Yeah.
another adult. Another adult. So many people will say, "Oh, we're just going to put down 300, just like we did with the spouse."
Right. That's what I
And,
would do.
and right, because it's joint is
Yes.
50-50. And the answer is no, it's more complicated than that.
Ooh.
Okay. And the mistake is not thinking this out, because you need to get a story straight and you should do it as soon as possible. Okay. And what's the story you're asking is, why do I have a joint account with my sisters? Question number one.
Okay.
And whose money is sitting in that bank account?
Hmm.
And question number three is, what were we intending to do with that money in the bank account? Now, the most common situation with joint with an adult is with a parent,
Right.
and there's case law on this. There's a Supreme Court case that deals with that the account is being held for management purposes to the benefit of the parent.
That's right.
In which case, we would treat it just like the RESP and say not included,
Ah, right.
right? So
Right.
even though your name is joint, you have to put it in. You have to say you have access to this account.
Oh.
You should even put down the value the same way we have the RESP as a value. But
Mhm.
on this thing, is it your money? Well, that's a question that's a question you have to answer. Is this your money? Let's move on to the last one.
Okay.
The last one that we'll deal with today is debts. Okay. And um, some debts are easy to understand, some are a little bit more complicated. And today we're going to go somewhere in between, between easy and complicated. So an easy example is a mortgage. How much is the
Mhm.
mortgage, right? And if the house is in joint names, then that the mortgage is likely joint, and you're going to be putting one half,
Right.
right?
Right. That makes sense.
So So make sure that you put 1/2 if it's joint.
Right.
Again, we're looking at title, mortgage, joint, right?
Right.
Okay. On the more complicated, are if you look at the bullet points right above it, it says there are contingent liabilities. Okay, so that should be its own video, right? Like nobody thinks about it, but they're very important, and it could cost you thousands of dollars if you don't, literally thousands of dollars if you don't deal with it. That's on the complicated. What's in the middle here are debts that have zero balances. So let's say you have a lot of credit cards and you have a credit card. Whoops, where did it go? Over here, you have a credit card.
Yeah.
And it's with, let's make it fun, Canadian Tire, MasterCard, right?
Right. Right.
But there's no balance on
Right.
valuation date. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't even have to list it
Yeah.
because I don't use it. It's kind of
Yeah.
dormant. And the answer is no, you have to list it. Okay. And if you don't list it, and the other spouse says, you haven't told me about this, and you say, well, it's dormant,
Yeah.
right? It very well may be, and it might just be an oversight in that extent. However, there are many situations where spouses will use um, a form of credit, a credit, yeah, there's a term for this, a credit facility, in order to pay themselves money, and they'll always maintain as they'll accrue a debt and then pay it off within the month, and so it's always zero, but
Right.
really they're moving money through their credit account. So it could be complicated, but more important, it needs to be disclosed that this account exists, even if it's dormant and has a zero. Now, sometimes it's actually difficult to get statements for dormant accounts because some credit cards will only issue a statement where there is a balance. So in that case, you would have to go to the bank itself or call the credit card company to ask them just to send some kind of letter that says as of this date, or some kind of printout. But the takeaway here is that even if you have a zero balance, you do need to disclose it. It's a mistake that people ask me a lot of times about, and so I'm just bringing it up.
Wow. Okay, just jaw dropping. I mean, half the time I'm looking at the share screen, and I look at myself. I go, my mouth is still open. Um, yeah. So what? Like, I mean, let's say that I'm filling out the form, and like, why do I care so much that I have to be absolutely, accurate and perfect in filling out these forms?
Yeah.
Why do I care?
So I mean, accuracy is the key. Perfection is lofty, but
Right.
and in fact, that's what I would say. Um, you are going to make mistakes, and that's human. It's not okay necessarily, but it's human,
Yeah.
and you're going to necessarily have to update for sure, but also to correct your form when these things come up. And there's only so many times that you're going to be able to say, oh, this was an
Right.
oversight, this was a mistake,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, until you lose credibility. And credibility has two functions. One is that your form is not reliable. Okay,
True.
so in
Okay.
other words,
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
even if you have a bad memory, then
Yeah.
you're not very credible because you can't. It's just not reliable. You don't know,
Right.
right? And on the other hand, and of course, this is family law. This is where many people go to first, is that maybe you're doing it maliciously. You're hiding information, right?
Right.
So in both of those situations, both of those are not good outcomes, and you want to take the time to make sure that your form is something that you could look at and then take that information and go to the next step, which is calculations or make legal arguments over the information. That's okay. That's part of life. Is to have the legal arguments, but you're making it over solid information, and your information is reliable. Uh, Additionally, by having reliable information, you're building trust, and you could put a dollar value on that, right? If there's a lack of trust in the process, then it's harder to get to a conclusion of that process, and that costs money in the form of either legal fees, time off of work, emotional stress. there is a value to building trust.
It's yeah, because I was probably more worried about what would a judge think if, if the other side said that my financial statement is inaccurate, that kind of
Right,
thing.
but a judge is not necessarily going to look for those inaccuracies as much as they're going to be brought up by the other spouse
It will
if
be
you're in a
brought up
court
by
case,
the other spouse. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And very unfortunately, but very more more than just commonly, that people will fight over this very issue, that you haven't provided accurate disclosure or full disclosure, and
True.
the disclosure itself and putting these entries onto a form become the issue. And
Yeah.
underlying that is this person can't be trusted. This person doesn't
Right.
have reliable
Absolutely.
information.
Yeah, that is the main thing. So sometimes, as you said, people are human, and they make mistakes. So let's say it is genuinely a mistake, and you started an application for divorce at the court, and you realize, oh, I didn't do that. I didn't fill that correctly. Are you allowed to file an amended Form 13.1? Are you allowed to do that?
Absolutely. You don't even have to call it amended. You could
Oh,
just
okay.
file, you
Okay.
can file a new one. I do recommend it in
Um,
such a circumstance where there was an actual mistake,
yeah,
such as an
yeah,
account that you forgot about. You should make,
yeah. An
you
honest
should,
mistake.
yeah, you should make a note when
Okay.
in the place where you're putting it in under description, perhaps just say, this was mistakenly forgotten.
Right. And
Maybe
then,
even because, right? It was mistakenly forgotten in
yeah,
my last draft because.
yeah, yeah,
Again, if you tell a story and it's believable story, then that actually builds credibility,
that's true. Yeah.
right? So in
Yes.
other words, you can actually make it into a credibility
A
building
positive.
situation, a
Exactly.
positive.
Yeah, because if you're trying your best to be frank, to be complete in your disclosure, so you go, oh, I forgot about this,
Right,
because or like that zero balance. Oh, I just saw Heather's and Shmuel's video,
right,
and I didn't
exactly.
realize I had to put the zero balance one in. So that's really good. All right, any more last words? We're gonna wrap up here.
There you go.
Thanks so much for coming in today, and I always learn so much, and I always find that it's so surprising that what you're supposed to do, and it's just not what you think.
Right, and we're just filling out a form.
Yes, I thought how hard can that be, right? Because
That's right.
I thought it was gonna be easier, but anyway, okay. Well, thanks so much for coming in, and thanks everyone for watching. And if you like this video, give us a thumbs up, and also if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. And then we're gonna see you at the next video. Thanks. Bye.